This episode of The Biggest Table is brought to you in part by Wild Goose Coffee. Since 2008, Wild Goose has sought to build better communities through coffee. For our listeners, Wild Goose is offering a special promotion of 20% off a one-time order using the code TABLE at checkout. To learn more and to order coffee, please visit wildgoosecoffee.com. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Biggest Table. I am your host, Andrew King. In this podcast, we explore the table, food, eating, and hospitality as an arena for experiencing God's love and our love for one another. And today, I'm joined by Victoria Loorz. Victoria is a Wild Church pastor, an eco-spiritual director, and co-founder of several transformation-focused organizations focused on the integration of nature and spirituality. She feels most alive when collaborating with mystery and kindred spirits to create opportunities for people to remember themselves back into intimate, sacred relationship with the rest of the living world. After 20 years as a pastor of indoor churches, she launched the first Church of the Wild in Ojai, California, and began to meet others with the same sense of call to leave building and expand the beloved community beyond our own species. She then co-founded the Ecumenical Wild Church Network. She is the author of Church of the Wild and co-author of Field Guide to Church of the Wild. So thanks for joining me today, Victoria. Excited to unpack this Church of the Wild with you.
Happy to do so.
So I want to start here because it was a great quote from your book that sort of sums up what I thought of when I was thinking of Church of the Wild. And you write, wild spirituality is an opportunity to reorient our relationship with the whole world through a wild Christ that existed before words and churches and empires. It is an act of resistance against the attempts to sever human participation from the whole system of life. Spiritual practices that reconnect us in conversation with the sacred world are the underground mycelium of Church of the Wild. So can you unpack that? Because I feel like that was a great summary of what you're talking about in your book, but it's also a big concept.
Big thing, yeah. It is, and it just keeps not so much expanding, but maybe that, but deepening. This so I kind of start with what I love words and getting to what the core of what words meant when they were first adopted, and how they shift throughout time and kind of lose and often even become the opposite of what they were meant to be. So religion is one of those, that legios, like ligament, it means reconnection. And so, the whole purpose of humans having religion is to reconnect not just with God, but with each other, with our own selves, with our place. And half of that has been, disconnected. And so it becomes in a lot of Christian religion, just about reconnecting with God, maybe with each other. But we lose the fullness of what that actually means. And how does that impact our spirituality? We see how it impacts the world, right, by being separate, seeing ourselves as separate, seeing the rest of the world as resource here just for our consumption. And in order to do that with any being, we have to desacralize them. We need to desecrate them. We need to make them not a holy other. And I think that's anti-biblical. I think it's so off base that it impacts, it gives us license to destroy the world, which is what we've done as a species. It also more quietly disconnects us from our own spiritual reality. It's like you don't know what you're missing when you're cut off. And so that was really the impetus of this, of like, I got to a point in my own life where I was a pastor, and that was part of my life. And then I also was involved in the climate movement as another part of my life. And, so right after seminary 30 some years ago, I did work to reconnect the evangelical church with the rest of the living world as part of the evangelical worldview. It wasn't something new. It's not a leftist agenda. It's just caring. Then it was about caring for creation. And since then, it's just deepened that what I recognized after many years of pastoring and then many years in the climate movement was what was missing in both worlds was deep, intimate, actual kinship relationship with our place and all the other beings. And that, as all the scientists say, most of the politicians even say who understand the need for reconnection, is that at core, it's a spiritual problem. And therefore, at core, it's a spiritual solution, And it's not just churches getting involved with the climate movement. It's not just lowering our, climate footprint or whatever. That's important. It's not to de-emphasize that, but at the core, the church is here to reconnect, to be an agent of reconnection. And so what people are needing, what the world is longing for, is ways to reconnect in intimacy and in love with each other, within our own selves, and within our place. That's just something that has been so disconnected from our vocabulary and our worldview and our way of seeing that we've forgotten. But our ancestors, all of our ancestors knew this, and so it's an act of remembering who we are in relationship with all of life.
Right, and because you talk about that, this isn't, and you sort of alluded to it in your just past comments, that this isn't just about us loving creation, but learning to be loved by creation. And so how did you get to that point where you began to see that I don't need to just love my place, but I need to be loved by my place? Because that's a different posture.
It is. I mean, Robin Wall Kimmerer certainly talks about it. And, but it was, even before that, was like, wait, for me to just love somebody and them not respond, that's not really love. That's maybe infatuation,
right,
or admiration. But actual love is reciprocal, is two-way, is me opening up and in vulnerability to another, and they open up as well, and we enter into, sacred conversation, into relationshiping, the verb. And so in order to really, that's why I use the words in the book, falling in love, because that feels different. When you fall in love with somebody, then that relationality is implicit versus I love ice cream,
right.
And so, we just have an anemic language for relationship. And that's just the reality of the English language, the Romantic languages that are disconnected from our relationship with place and with each other. And most, I would just say all, it's just that I don't know all of them.
Right. Yeah.
More indigenous languages. I was just on a call this morning with a woman who speaks and teaches Welsh, as well as American indigenous languages, as well as Hebrew.
Yeah.
Is so much more deeply, the language itself is deeply embedded with locality, with place, with concreteness, with soil. And so it's impossible to, in those languages, or it's not impossible, I should say, it is possible to have a language that invites us into relationship, but we don't have that. And so we are, and so it's a lot of undoing. It's undoing of and remembering of what it means to be in intimate relationship, that it's with any other. And, some people understand, well, I know my cat or my dog, I know that they are in relation, I know they love me.
Right.
And yet, what is it in our brains that just block off that anybody else, any other living being can't have that capacity? I mean, it doesn't even make sense when you name it. That it is that we are in relationship. And if God and Christianity and religion isn't about relationship and love, then it has lost I think it's lost its purpose. It's lost its core. And so really this is getting back to, these are developing practices, spiritual practices of remembering and of living into relationship with the deeper part of it's a lot of undoing of worldview and of habits and of language. But then it's developing that relationship. Once you develop a relationship with somebody very different than you you expand,
Right.
And so that expansion happens when you commit to entering into these practices. And it's
Hmm.
not something we have to make happen. We don't even need to, but it's just allowing the possibility and availing ourselves to the holy that is within and between all things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I want to get to some of that undoing, because I think there are these forces that have and continue to push us away from that relationship. But I also want to get to sort of to begin with sort of the foundational, because you know, you and I both worked in churches. We've studied scripture. And so like you do ground your work in scripture. This isn't just some leftist agenda, like you said. Like this is you're trying to help us reconnect with what God originally intended for us to be. And so help us understand the scriptural foundation of what you're trying to do. Just, again, because people will say, well, this isn't biblical. Like, you're
Right.
saying this is very biblical. Like,
Actually, yeah.
yeah.
And so I hit a place in my own journey where, I was a pastor and I had been in the climate movement and I was feeling something missing kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it came to a place where I had to recognize, I actually experience, if I really think about it, I experience the presence of the holy. I experience the presence of God more when I'm in relationship with nature than even when I'm in church.
Mm.
And for a pastor who is focused on very, I was focused on transformational kind of practices or formational, just like centering prayer and Taizé prayer and retreats and all these things where I wanted that, direct experience with God.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to get to that place to go, wow, you know what? There's something missing here, even as I've been focusing on it. So I got to a place where I had to admit that I had found that was true for me. And I think it's true for a lot of us,
Right.
whether we're in religion or not, established religion or not. Or, do I have to then, like pastors have told me, God's not a tree, you're worshiping nature, those kind of things. And I was like, okay, so are these two separate things? Is it true that I need to choose one? Is this a binary? And that's when I dove into the scriptures to just go, is this true? And as I asked that question, it was like, just sometimes when we just ask the right question, the answers are available.
Right.
The answers were just like everywhere. It was just like, oh my gosh, every single leader in the Old Testament and the New Testament at a pivotal point in history and a pivotal point in their own leadership were called into relationship with the wilderness. Were called into, Jesus was thrust into the wilderness.
Yeah.
Others were allured into the wilderness. Some, like Paul, were kicked off the horse and sent into the wilderness. Like all of them, every single one of them had a time where they were sent into the wilderness. So I began it like, what is this? It's not just a, like a metaphor.
No.
This isn't just like wilderness has a difficult time. Like there's something to going out into relationship with the trees and the waters outside of the village that we're overlooking.
Mm-hmm.
And then started to look at, well, Jesus actually, every time he went to pray, he went into, not just in, which is a locational word, but the Greek is basically, it means into, which is a relational word. Went into the wilderness, into the lake, into the garden. He went into relationship with the natural world. And that's where he met God. And so we're overlooking that too, like I say in the book, like the church is really good at, focusing on prayer. That was my thing.
Yeah.
But and then sometimes we'll go and do retreats out in the wilderness because it's pretty. We'll have some time and it's calming. We can meditate out there maybe, but we disconnect them like Jesus never did. I never, when I was a pastor of indoor churches, talked about prayer in the context of going into the wilderness.
And I think too, I'm curious, sorry to interrupt, like Because I
Okay.
think when we think about Jesus going into the wilderness, or Moses going into the wilderness, or God leading his people through the wilderness, we think of it as a desolate, almost God-forsaken place, like barren desert. Maybe like, you and I were talking, and you went to Arizona State and Tempe, so like maybe like Arizona desert, just
Right.
devoid of life. But I don't think that's what you're hinting at. Like,
They happened, these human beings, if we're going to believe that these are not stories that were made up of
right,
people that lived in a fairy tale land, they lived in actual places, and they were drawn into the wilderness of their actual place, which for many of them, like in you know the Middle East, where a
right,
lot of these stories took place, happens to be desert or Mediterranean terrain. And so we translate that like we got to go out to the desert, like you just said, but
right.
it's not. It's just where we are. It's like it matters where we are. Our it. I mean, I always go back to that Jacob story of, he's in the desert, he's in the wilderness, not necessarily desert. He's in the wilderness, running away from his brother, and he has his dream, and the
Mhm.
dream says, actually, it's connecting heaven and earth. And he wakes up going, oh my God, this place is holy, and I didn't see it, you know?
Mhm.
And so I feel like that's what we're doing. It's like this place is holy where we are, but we are so disconnected from it that we have to go on a retreat somewhere to, like, it's pretty. And then
Yeah.
we come back home to our regular life because we live in a city or a suburb, and it doesn't matter. Like, we are still on this creation.
Mhm.
Another scripture that was transformational for me was, just like the Romans 8, the creation groaning. What are they groaning for, though? Like, that's when I did a deep dive on
Yeah.
that. And it's like what it literally says when you translate it, and I'm going to butcher it a bit because it's not in front of me,
Yeah.
but the center of it is, in order to be like Christ, to enter into our Christ likeness, we need to, like, it's provisional. It's only when and if we enter into that groaning with creation. Like,
Mm.
that's when we are in connection with Christ.
Mm.
I mean, it's literally provisional. There's no way around it. There's no translation that doesn't say that. It's like, and that doesn't mean we just are like groaning, crying. It means that we are in such deep connection, just like we are in love with anybody. When they are suffering, we suffer.
Mm.
So it's that deep relationality with all of creation, not just with those in our family or in our community. Um, yeah, I mean, I've got a bunch more.
And that, I think it's really, really helpful, because I think, again, like you said, we've separated nature from our habitations, right? Or like, the national parks have become separate places, and I think they're worth preserving. I don't think we should get rid of them by any stretch of the means, but nature is a place we go to, whereas you're calling us to inhabit something deeper. And you're very specific too, where you're saying this is church of the wild, not church in the wild. Um, and so help us even understand sort of why,
Yeah.
prepositions matter, and they matter deeply to you. And I love it, right? Because language is important, and it
Yeah.
communicates deeply.
Language not only communicates our experience, but predicates our experience.
Hmm.
If we don't have words for something, we miss it.
Yeah.
And so in our language, we've lost a lot of the words of relationality and sacredness of the whole.
Mhm.
So yeah, so Church of the Wild, like, it was a very intentional. Every word there was very intentional. There's some words that are difficult to sort of redeem because they're so laden with wounding for a
Mm.
lot of people. Some Christian words, but some words can be re-understood when you just place them with something else. So putting church with wild makes you go, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
And it's definitely, I mean, it's generally in, but people think of wild as, Yosemite. But it's the wild places that are wild. To me, means the essence of what we're created to be,
Yeah.
versus domesticated by humanness. and so it's putting those two together, that we are creating community of connecting with the holy, connecting with God, connecting with Christ in relationship with the whole community beyond our species even. And it's in often, it's not indoors. You can kind of talk about it indoors. You can do some things indoors, but it's really when you make the time to really deeply listen to those places. It can be in your backyard, in your garden. It can be a park down the street. It can be the rain, the sunrise. It's slowing down with a reverence of the whole. And then it's the of. It's that we are not just inviting the trees to worship with us. Even if you read the Psalms, the trees are inviting us into the constant worship that is creation. And so it's this the holding is what I now call just the holy wild. And I need to just mention one more word for the word geeks among us. Is what really was a transformation for me was when I learned and then deepened into and did deeper study into John, the Gospel of John, the opening, the opening hymn of "In the beginning was the Logos." The word is Logos, which is translated in every single New Testament available right now as the Word. But 500 years ago, during the Reformation, there was one translator who was the first one to go back to the original writings since it had been canonized and since the Bible had been canonized. And Erasmus of Rotterdam, he was a scholar. He was just really committed to what is this? What do these words actually say? What did it actually say in the beginning? And his versions used the translation of the word logos that was used the first 4 centuries and understood by the people who first heard these words and first were grappling with this, who is Jesus now that he's gone? And understood Jesus as Christ. And so the word that John used, or the community of John used to describe this, that God in the beginning, this is Jesus wasn't just a man who's gone, but in the beginning was this logos, and that Jesus is embodying this logos. And logos meant then, and for 4 centuries after, and I think 4 centuries before, it meant a deep relationality. It meant conversation, not word. It meant the whole relationship of backing and forthing, and so it was translated into Latin for the first 4 centuries as conversation.
Wow!
And to me, that changed everything. It's in the beginning was the conversation, and the conversation was God, was with God, and the conversation was God, and all things became through this conversation. There's nothing that exists that doesn't come through conversation, which is a way of saying the sinew of relationship, which is love. And so that all of a sudden, okay, now first time I'm starting to understand it in a different way, in a way that makes sense to my heart. I've always loved that. In the beginning was the word. There was something just really yummy about that part of John. But that opened it up for me, that this is what this actually means. It was, I have a theory that it was changed politically, which I don't need to go into, but when we understand, all of life really is a conversation, all of life only exists in relationship, that we need each other. Our bodies are even a conversation, the bacteria and the proteins in conversation with each other, the planets are in conversation with each other, and atom is in conversation. The protons and neutrons aren't even nouns; they're just little verbs of relationality. And that's what Christ means. Christ is that sinew, that conversationing between all things. Okay, now it makes sense to me. Now it's something I can, that changed everything for me. And that's when I started to go, okay, we need a new way of practicing our faith, encouraging one another, that is not disconnected with the rest of the living world, that has cut off the voices of not only other people that aren't like us, which we lose a lot in that, understanding of who God is in that, and the voices of all of the more than human others that don't use language like we do, but we still can communicate because we're interconnected.
I love that you touched on that, because I loved your unpacking of that idea, because it's like, I was raised evangelical, and so we believe that Christ is in all and through all, and by him all things were made. Like, right? Like, we have this deep idea that Christ, and yet, like, when it comes to nature, we're like, don't get too close, don't worship nature, don't talk to the trees, or like, don't.
Right.
Because it's like, and so that's where it's so weird of like, okay, we believe this Christ created all things, and through him creation is upheld, like, through his power, through his presence, creation is upheld, and yet, like, we are scared of creation.
And you got to look at why. You got to, if something doesn't make sense, that's when you start to go, there's something here that doesn't make sense. And you can't just go, oh, well, it's a mystery,
Right.
You look into, and there's reasons why. There's reasons why we are afraid to connect with nature, and there's not really pleasant things.
No, and like you talk that there is a point of nature where it's not all just lovey-dovey, right? Like, nature,
part of God too.
Yeah, like, there are wild beasts that can hurt us. Like, I can't be stupid and expect a coyote or a mountain lion to just, we're still living in a world that is inhabited by sin, and sin affects everything. And so I think we're not at that point where the lion lays down with the sheep,
Right. And the way life is, the way life is we are kept alive through a system that I despise, but is real, a system of predation. One being to stay alive needs another being to give their life.
Yeah.
Or we take it without us, which was what we do. But we can still, so species killing each other, we kill other species. Like, it's part of, I don't get it, but it is what it is, and therefore it is holy,
Right.
And so it doesn't mean I have to go kill things in order to be more like God.
No.
But it does mean life is more complicated and more complex than what we want it to be. And there's something about knowing that that we are not just predators, we are also prey. And we don't like that. We don't like the idea that a mosquito can, draw their life from us because it gives us itchiness, We don't like that. We don't like when there's a bear in the community because, oh my God, they might hurt somebody. And so I get it, but we've gone overboard on that. It's like we've eliminated the majority of predators, apex predators, and a few levels down throughout the world because we're so human focused that we're the only ones that matter. Right. But it's not an easy thing. But that's God. God is not an easy thing. God is not something simple of like, God is not all light. God is also dark. God is also when we're sleeping. It's also winter. It's also compost. And we don't like to look at that. And it's to our detriment.
Right. So we're content in our black box churches where even if we're surrounded by beauty, we want no windows in a sanctuary because it's a sound better or it might look better, and we can have lights and fog machines.
Right. We can create the fog ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it was fun. It's funny. It's like we used to live in Park City, Utah, before we moved to Flagstaff. And the one thing, the church we attended, it's part of the Evangelical Free Church. But the one thing they did so well is they created a sanctuary full of natural windows that looked out at the mountains. And so, like, yes, lighting was bad, and yes, sound could be bad, hard to work with. And there were some people who were like, oh, we need to get rid of all the windows. And so we can, so people can focus on Jesus better. Right. Like, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, it just like where have we gone so wrong that like me being distracted in a church service by nature, by seeing elk or horses run across, like, might not connect me with Jesus.
It just, when you see it, it all of a sudden just doesn't make sense anymore. And you got to go, okay,
Yeah.
what's going on here?
We live in this moment where, like, there's so much that's warring against us internally, externally, technology, AI, like, like the myriad of problems, we could be here all day listing, right? Like, but I feel like what your project and these ideas that you and your community are cultivating have a chance and a prospect of helping us resist empire. And so, like, how can Church of the Wild and this reconnection conversation help us get past this allure of empire?
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of answers I
Yeah.
think we could offer there, but what comes to mind is a couple things. It took a lot of generations to get here, so to be patient with ourselves, um, and so I think recognizing kind of what we were just saying, when we allow ourselves to recognize what doesn't fit right within us, and we just kind of overlook because we don't have the time or energy to see it. I think it kind of begins there, where you allow yourself to see what is, and to see where you might be, maybe possibly not be right
Yeah.
fully. So it takes some humility and some vulnerability to look at, what you have established within your life as your worldview. It's scary. And so we do need each other as we do this deeper looking. And then we need to we need support right there. And then there's, because that's like a death of a way that we thought life was.
Yeah.
And so we need to remember how to grieve together, how to let that go, how to release what that means, and in that we're emptying ourselves so that we're open to what is, to what is God, and a way to do that is to really be with others who are already what is, without ego, without these layers of domestication. And those who are not human are already there. They live there. And so, I mean, there's been all kinds of studies about how spending time in nature lowers your blood pressure, and
Yep.
you feel calmer, and you release stress. And there's a reason why, and it's the presence of the holy.
Yeah.
It's it's the presence of these others, that the outer landscape is connected with our inner landscape. They're connected. They're not disconnected. And so the more we can spend time just being, there's all kinds of sort of little best practices and invitations we do through Seminary of the Wild, the work that I do.
Yeah.
But really, it's just all of us can do it, because that's where we're from. This is who we are. And so it really is more of a remembering than creating some new way of being Christian or whatever.
Yeah.
It is just a remembering of who we actually are. And being with people who are, you can feel that even just when people are really secure within themselves, you feel yourself feeling more secure,
Yeah.
And so that's what this cedar tree that I'm looking at on my window, like, is fully cedar tree all the time. And just being with them, just that mirroring happens, is a real thing. But then when you recognize that your connection with this tree, when you start to feel like, wow, you know what? This tree is really solid and sturdy, or this tree is really leaning over, and I feel like my life is kind of leaning over. That those aren't just random metaphors, that there's some kind of connection there, and that connective tissue is the presence of Christ. Like, how trippy is that?
Yeah.
And so it makes every encounter a sacred one. And so at the core of the practices of Church of the Wild or Seminary of the Wild, or any of this this movement that's bigger than the work that I'm doing, to reconnect with the rest of the alive world as at least alive, and ideally as sacred, because God is all of it, not just this little narrow recent part of it. just availing ourselves again and again. So like Church of the Wild, that's what it is. It's like we meet outside. There's over 300 to 400 communities that we know of that are in the network. And they meet outside, in parks, in, some of them meet in the middle of the city,
Mm.
um, and it's ideally like out of the center of people, and meeting, and just maybe you have a theme, a hymn, music, a poem, a scripture, a story, and then there's an invitation to go out yourself and just for 20 to 45 minutes, just be there. Just feel yourself drawn to a place, trust it, sit down, listen.
Yeah.
The
So,
end.
yeah, I want to ask, because I think some of us, and I felt it, I'm sure you have felt it. We've been raised in a tradition that tells us not to do this. And so, like, what you're describing sounds so good, but I think taking that first step to grieve it, like,
Right.
it's comfortable, like, and so to walk away, I was a pastor, I got let go of a job for financial reasons. And so all of a sudden you find yourself without that community, and it can be very disorienting. And so
Right.
wanting to hold on is a very real thing, even if we're disillusioned. And so how to find the courage just to even take a step might feel hard for people, like, because it is so countercultural, but
Right.
yet so beautiful. And so it's like this tug, like, if we're honest with ourselves, I think many of us will feel this tug and pull reading your work. And I felt it in myself of like, okay, this sounds, hippie-ish, like, or like, it sounds not Christian, like my
Right.
mind went all the places, right? Like,
Right.
and maybe not rightly, wrongly, whatever, right?
No, it's real.
And so, like, how do we deal with this tension we may feel with ourselves? Because it's real. And so I think we have to own that, like, hey, walking away or trying something new means the loss of
Right.
community or means the loss of structure.
Absolutely does. That's a really important, in fact, I got off because
Yeah.
it's only after that grief, and that, which the grief can only happen as you can name the loss. And it's only then that in that emptiness, in that composting, that new life emerges. I mean, this is the Pascal mystery. This is nothing new. This
No.
is how life evolves, emerges, whatever. It's how we grow. And so to skip any of those steps is not helpful. So, like when I first started the first Church of the Wild, I was in a church as an associate pastor. I kept talking about these things within the context of scripture, asking the questions like, what does this mean? What are we missing? So I think I needed to start there. My community there needed to start there. And then when I left the indoor church, I wasn't planning on doing anything, but people came around me and they're like, that church you've been talking about for 2 years in this backwards kind of way, or not direct, not backwards, just kind of a not direct way. That's where I want to go to church. And I was like, we can't, I'm just making that up. And so it took a few months to kind of basically talk myself into, all right, let's just do it. And at first, it's like I didn't explain too much. I was just like, let's just try this. And everyone was kind of resistant, going, it's weird. And when people experienced it, they're like, you know what? I just tapped into a connection with God as I know God. You're not talking about a different God, And so it's very much of an experience. And so however you can create that experience for yourself in a way that's not 10 steps, but like one step.
Right.
And then another step, and then the first 2 years, I only held services at Easter time on Holy Saturday. Because I figured there was enough places to go to do Good Friday. There wasn't plenty of places to go do or Easter Sunday, but we just kind of skip over, like you just said, we just kind of skip over the Holy Saturday, which is an essential part of this mystery. And so I would just hold the Holy Saturday of the grief. And I think that was, at the time, I was just kind of like annoyed that everybody just skipped over it.
Yeah.
And as you know, like all things that change, you don't really see it till after you look back.
Right. Yep.
As I look back now, it's like that was really essential. It's
Mm,
like that piece was something missing for people,
yeah.
and you really can't skip over until you've made space within you. It's like truth and reconciliation. Like the truth, you have to see the truth, have the courage to see the truth. And then there's a grief and there's a listening to the stories of those you've hurt and all of that. And then you can talk about the reconciliation. And
Mm,
even within traditional theology, like evangelical theology, you just skip over all that. It's like,
right.
sorry. And then you reconcile, you just
Yep.
say this thing, like, let's hurry up through it.
Yeah.
It's not real. And so I
Mm,
think as much as, and I've made that transition from evangelical to not
yeah.
to something that's emerging. But I think that, and there's a lot of people that are drawn to Church of the Wild and to Seminary of the Wild who, like you were saying about your podcast, who don't have a background in Christianity, or they've left a long time ago, or their parents left. All of us, though, have that. All of
Yeah.
us who are European descent have that history. It's in our ancestry. It's in our DNA,
Hmm.
now.
Yep.
And so to deny that and skip over that, is good for some people. But I think people are really drawn to something that's still connected with who they are, who their ancestors were, and the truth, the how do you even say it? The real Jesus in the midst of it all.
Yeah.
It's like most of us don't walk out of churches because of Jesus.
No.
We
No.
walk out of churches because of the institution,
Yep.
Um, but we don't want to walk away from the core of this deep connection with the holy, but
Mm-hmm.
we don't have communities to do that anymore.
Yeah.
It's like there's not this, and I hear this from a lot of people, who the container of church held this space where we can talk about our spiritual lives, where we can share our spiritual lives together. There's no other place in the culture to do that. We can still have friends. We can still have friends that left the church, but even that, it's just kind of like, so we're at a taco shop. How was yours?
Yeah.
Spiritual life this week. Like, we just don't do that. But
Mm-mm.
that's what this offers. It's like a common ground, which is our common ground.
Yeah.
And so, like, I've had wild church gatherings where there were people from across the scale,
Mm,
the spectrum of people who are still going to church on Sunday. They came to this on Saturday. There's still, there's people who left church a long time ago. There's people that are, different religions, Jewish people, or people who are, I even had people that are full on atheist coming.
yeah.
And the container is held in a way of like, God is bigger than all of us.
Right.
Part of the letting go we need to do is that we think we know it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so that humility of like, this is my experience. And this is how I've experienced God. This is how I experienced this time, this 40 minutes of just being. And for a lot of people, it's just like, I felt really rested,
Mm,
I felt it was beautiful. And then some people, have a deeper sort of connection or revelation in that time. And you're not trying to correct each other, you're just in this community of love, of like, what's your experience of the holy? This is what it means to be in direct connection with God. And we're
mm.
all, I don't know.
No, the experience is
The
that
experience.
healing. Yeah. This experience that is healing, that is peaceful, like, because you also talk about like, trauma, and like all of us have some trauma, some bigger than others, and some obviously need professional help, right? Like,
Right.
but
Yeah.
you also talk about the role that, nature can play in healing our trauma. And so like, as we carry our trauma, big or small, like how does nature and this spirituality in nature and connecting with Jesus and like, how do you
Mm.
see it functioning to help us reckon with our trauma and
Yeah.
hopefully move past our trauma? Because that's what we want religion to do, is to lead us into flourishing. And we
Right.
can't flourish if we're carrying our trauma with us.
Yeah, because we never like get over it, but we
No.
do get to a place where we've reconciled with it and it's been integrated into who we are. And so, there's a lot of ways to talk about this, and I'm not a trauma expert, but I think this is real, and this is what we kind of focus on. And I think it was Gabor Mate who is an expert in trauma, and he said lots of things about it, but one thing that just sticks with me is that trauma is unwitnessed pain. And so, it's like you've seen people who have gone through similar traumatic things, and some people are completely destabilized by it, and some people are able to integrate it into their life and actually be of service to others,
Right.
And I think a lot of the difference is when the trauma happened, and since then they've been able to be seen in the midst of that. And a lot of trauma, it can't be seen for, lots of reasons. And so I think that's even what Romans 8 is talking about, is as we witness the pain of each other in relationship, the difficult, painful suffering that we go through, that life doesn't stay stuck within us. It does transform us and allow us to be of service to others who have been through something similar. I mean, that's just what happens. And so as we gather with others who aren't human, who have witnessed tons of trauma, if you imagine, like these trees have been cut down twice, and they've been forest fires, and they've, but to witness that, like what Romans 8 says, is like to be witness to that, to grieve with them, to groan along with them, allows the trauma to pass through. And we need each other for that. And so I think it just inherently happens as we avail ourselves. And, there's a Mary Oliver poem I love to refer back to. She says, tell me of despair, yours, and I'll tell you mine. It's like when we go out and just can release, and I know a lot of people that have been through a lot of trauma as a child felt like they were seen and safe in nature. You just hear time and again, because as a child, you sort of inherently know that. And a lot of adult trauma recovery is done in relationship with nature, because we can share our despair with someone who is non-judgmental, who's not going to, abuse that privilege of receiving our story. And then listening to their story back is important, and what that looks like, maybe uncomfortable for people, but you just ask for it, and you just see what comes up, and it's not as complicated as we want to make it.
No.
And so it's just that relationality and then the more you can allow yourself to be heard by the river, the more your courage you get to allow yourself to be seen by other people. And the more other people can receive you, we need training as a community about how to receive that trauma and not give advice and not try to, shame them or fix them or anything, but just allow that to be co-witnessed and grieved with them. That's where the healing actually happens. That's the presence of Christ.
It goes back to that language of connectedness, or the, language of reciprocity. You even start your book with, like, you simply need to learn how to listen, and this language of connectedness, and like, can we unlearn and relearn what it means to listen, not only to each other, but to this creation, and this beautiful, wild creation that God has created for us.
Yeah. And with us, like this co-creation that's always unfolding. It's not stuck in 2,000 years ago, this spiritual journey. It's constantly unfolding with each other. And it's just as we narrow what each other means is detrimental. We say these people are included, and these people don't believe the way I do, and therefore they're evil, and we have now license to be violent. It leads to destruction. And that is, I think, the exact opposite of what Jesus was talking about.
Right.
So,
Yeah. If we believe John 10:10 to be words of truth from Jesus, that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus comes that we may have life and have it abundantly, that we have to learn what it means to not steal, kill, and destroy, and what it
right,
means to live
right.
abundantly.
And it's so easy to just skip over and take out of context.
Yeah.
Or just take out of habit, the
Mm-hmm.
meanings. But meaning is always unfolding. Life is very different now than 2000 years ago. To pretend it isn't is dumb.
Right.
And therefore, the way we process the essence of these stories that have survived of Jesus and of the core of what our faith is built on requires us to re-enter and re-engage in what is reality right now.
Yeah.
And we can't do that, just like Jesus couldn't do it. Like
Right.
all of them needed to be in relationship with the rest of the place and the
Mm-hmm.
land.
Yeah. And so to enter into this relationship, we all have to start someplace, and we've sort of touched on it, and you've even mentioned like a person begins where they are. And so like if listeners have enjoyed this and are like, hey, this has piqued my interest, like where would you recommend people begin? Like some people live in cities. I live in Flagstaff, where I can walk out into the forest
Yeah.
any day of the year, but other people are maybe in Chicago. Like, and so like, how do you begin this
Mhm.
journey if you feel stuck in a city?
Yeah. And it's there is something really life-giving to be able to walk out your garage into the national forest.
Yeah.
And all of it is holy, the
Right.
rain, the sun, the moon, the
Yeah.
the river that's now concrete, the
Mm-hmm.
LA River that's all concrete is still there. Like my daughter lives in LA, in Hollywood,
Okay. Okay.
right by Hollywood Boulevard, and they just after the Dodgers won, uh, they went out and went up to the top of the hill there, and they were just listening to the city celebrating, and there was an owl there, and on their way back they saw coyotes and they saw raccoons. Like they're everywhere.
Yeah.
I did a workshop in Chicago recently, and I was astonished at how many people had relationships with places that were just outside of their neighborhood.
Mm.
That there's these kind of places everywhere if we just sort of open our eyes.
Yeah.
And it's, like there's somebody on our staff who lives in Manhattan, in New York City, in a, fifth story up, and her relationship is with this tree that's right outside of her window.
Mm.
And that's become her particular other that she's deepened relationship with. So, or it's there's a spider in your shower,
Right.
normally, and I've seen this shift for me over the years, like, normally be like, get the spider out, kill the spider.
Right.
And I just noticed it like this last month, like there's this spider that ends up in my bathtub every freaking day. And so like one day I was like, I don't need to bring this spider out. And I'm like, I couldn't do it. Now I've shifted enough that it's like, it takes me 2 seconds to put this spider in a little cup with a cover and put him outside.
Yeah.
Like just that kindness. It's kindness.
Mm.
It's kindness to each other, and it's kindness to self, and it's living in a way that is kind to all. You can't just be kind to some people.
Right.
And it doesn't mean I want the spider to stay in my shower.
No. Right.
Doesn't mean I'm not going to do something to kill the ants that are taking over my cupboard. But there's ways to do this, this co-living with all other
Mm.
beings that is kind. Like
Yeah.
when I moved into this house, there was a wretched smell, and I thought it was
Mm.
mold. I was freaking out, like buying
Yeah.
all these things to get rid of the smell. And it turns out it was a mama otter who had her babies underneath my house.
Wow.
And so once I figured that out, we were able to have her move the babies instead of like forcing it. There's
Yeah.
ways to do this where once the mama felt that her kids were unsafe, we just opened up the places where she could take them out, and she re-nested them, and then we, secured it so that she could make her nest somewhere else. There are unkind ways to do this, and there are kind ways to do it. We have to eat. There's kind ways to do it. There's kind ways to have a burger.
Yeah.
And there's unkind ways. So I think it is a deepening into kindness as well.
Yeah.
And it sounds so simple.
It does.
But it does actually, that is the spiritual foundation of what we're about.
Yeah.
Is love.
No, it's love, it's kindness. And I think it's having that love and kindness towards yourself as you're on this journey. Like wherever you are, to be kind and loving towards yourself. Because like you said, like I can't love others if I am anxious or insecure or, but
love your neighbor as yourself. Like it's so foundational.
Right.
We can put the bumper sticker on, but then to really live into that is a lifelong, and it takes inner kindness of patience, of like, dang it, I just did it again.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to acknowledge that. I'm going to grieve that. I'm going to ask forgiveness. Yeah. And I'm going to move on. It's not a one-time deal. No. It's an ongoing aliveness.
Right. Well, no, I've loved this conversation. And so as we begin to wrap up, it's a question I ask all of the guests. What's the story you want the church to tell?
I think it's just that.
Yeah.
That we are, if the challenges, the crises that we are facing right now are at the core spiritual disconnection from each other, from our own essence of soul, from Christ, from the land, then the church can be that place of holy conversation, of bringing in the voices of those who have been othered, and be the place of conversation, of reconciliation with one another, with God, with the place, and of deep kindness and restoration. Like the church, it's not just about, getting rid of styrofoam cups and, reducing your carbon footprint. That's great. It's about this. How do we integrate this spirituality of interconnection, of Christ as the conversation between, into who we are as a church, and that has a billion layers.
Yes.
But as we start to consider that, what are we called to do as this particular community in this particular place? And there's a lot of great stories. My friend Forrest Inslee has a podcast called Circlewood. It's not called that. That's his organization. Oh, dang it! I'm gonna have to look that up. I will add it later. Yeah. But he works with a lot of churches, evangelical churches included, in how do they deepen relationship with their place, and not just like, I'm going to make a community garden. That's a good idea. But there are many ways that we can do this so that people have access to some wild land, for example, that a lot of inner city, especially communities, don't have, but churches have all this land all over this country. So there's lots of things that churches can do and say and be, that is that focal of the voice, hands, and heart of Christ.
Right. Yes. Oh, I love it. Love it. And some fun questions, about food. So what's one food you refuse to eat?
Oh boy. I had about 6 years where I just refused to eat meat, because I was like, I wouldn't kill an animal. I know I wouldn't, even if I was, who knows when you're starving, but I just know that's not me. But why am I okay with other people doing that?
Right.
I've since shifted, so that because of this predation thing, that we are there for one another, but it's about how we treat each other. So it's pulling away from industrial foods.
Yeah. Yep.
And like, ideally, I would love to like know the people that have relationships with the cows, and and there's
Right.
more and more. It takes some time of investing in your community to have relationship. I'm sure you talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
Relationship with your food means relationship with people who are, tending the food, growing the food,
Right.
and relationship with the food, themselves.
Yeah.
And so I think it's more that. It's more
Hmm.
that, like, how do I deepen my relationship with those others who have given their life? So
Hmm.
it means gratitude. It's different than grace at the beginning. It's like this deep gratitude that
Right.
these other beings are now part of me,
Hmm. Yeah,
and they've given their life for me. And how do I give my life to them, to
for
others?
sure. I love it. What's one of the best things you've ever eaten?
Oh my goodness gracious. Um, hmm, that's such a hard. Oh man. Well, okay, here's my answer.
Yeah.
And this is true. I have a friend who has gone through our Seminary of the Wild program. She's a chef, and she focuses on local food and um, foraging and
Hmm.
fishing, and the food that she made a breakfast salad, which
Oh,
sounds so weird, and I
yeah.
normally wouldn't even be like, oh my god. It was just like I couldn't stop. I was obnoxious. I couldn't stop saying every single bite, oh my god, this is so good.
Hmm.
But Ashley Rodriguez, um, she writes cookbooks, but she has a deep connection with the food
Okay.
themselves, and I think that's what makes the difference.
No, it does. And finally, there's a conversation among chefs about last meals, as in if you knew you only had one more meal left to
Mhm.
enjoy, what would it be? So if Victoria had one last meal, what might be
Mhm.
around her table?
Mhm. But I mean, the image that's coming up is just like it's more about the people that are there with me,
Yeah.
and the relationship with the food that is there. But I'm picturing just a Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah.
And
No.
just, foods that my mother and my grandmother made, even
Hmm.
though they're like super unhealthy
Yep.
because of the emotional connection there.
Hmm.
I think that's about the best answer I'm going to be able to come up with.
Many times it is. It's the food that remembers the stories associated with
Mhm.
it. It's the stories that go
It's good.
along with it, you know? So yeah. Um, so Victoria, this has been delightful. I loved unpacking Church of the Wild with you. It's helped me understand better, what the book talks about. And so if people are interested in your work, where can they find you?
Um, well, you can find the book on any
Yep.
bookseller, Church of the Wild. And then um, the center, it's actually the Center for Wild Spirituality, which is wildspirituality.earth, is where we offer programs. And then my name, victorialoorz.com. You can get connections to all of those, including to the Wild Church Network.
Awesome. So yeah, do connect with Victoria, read Church of the Wild, and there's the field guide now to Church of the Wild just to help you practice this. And just to take steps to reconnect with our interconnectedness of all of God's creation. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing it with others. Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Biggest Table, where we explore what it means to be transformed by God's love around the table and through food. Until next time, bye.
Mm, thank you.